While Ghislaine Maxwell was being convicted of 5 counts related to her sex trafficking, her friend Prince Andrew was busy trying to have Virginia Giuffre's legal case against him quashed. Giuffre accuses Prince Andrew of sexually assaulting her on 3 occasions when she was just 17. Andrew has denied all the charges she has made against him. This famous 2001 photo shows Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre. You can see convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell lurking in the background. Things have not gone well so far for Prince Andrew in his defence, at least in terms of his public image. He hasn't done much to help himself on that front. For a start, remember this from 2019.
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one's away, the other one's there. I was on terminal leave at the time from the Royal Navy, so therefore I was at home.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply it was almost impossible for me to sweat, and it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it.
Both claims made in that interview were immediately mocked for good reason. Andrew could not be guilty because he was in a Pizza Express in Woking, and he couldn't have been guilty because he can't sweat. Ridiculous. I don't know who told him it was a good idea. Now, in a civil claim against Prince Andrew by Virginia Giuffre, it's been revealed that Andrew's lawyers have been unable to hand evidence of either the visit to Pizza Express or the medical condition that prevents him from sweating. So they've been unable to prevent that to Giuffre's legal team. This led to an amazing headline in the Times. Prince Andrew cannot prove his inability to sweat after request by Virginia Giuffre's lawyers. Now, you'd have thought it's a medical condition. The royals, I don't think, are normally people who struggle to get an appointment with their GP. So if you did have a problem which meant that you couldn't sweat for a long period of time, I'm pretty sure someone would have written it down. Someone with a medical qualification would have written that down. And I don't know how he didn't think of that before he brought it up on the Newsnight interview. In any case, Prince Andrew's lawyers hope the details of the events surrounding the allegations will not need to be settled in court. That's because they want the case thrown out, because they claim a deal signed between Jeffrey Epstein and Giuffre in 2009 gives Prince Andrew immunity. That legal settlement was reached in 2009 between Epstein and Giuffre. That was after she brought a suit against him for sexual assault and exploitation. And the details of the settlement have now been revealed. It has been unsealed. What we've learnt from that unsealing is that Giuffre was paid $500,000 to drop the case against Epstein. And the part of the deal relevant to Andrew is the following. So the settlement states that Roberts, release, acquit, satisfy, and forever discharge the said second parties and any other person or entity who could have been included as a potential defendant, in brackets, other potential defendants, from all and all manner of action and actions of Virginia Roberts. Virginia Roberts was, of course, Virginia Giuffre's name in 2009. That's her her maiden name. Prince Andrew's lawyers are set to argue in court that the settle indemnifies him from Giuffre's legal action, as he is included under the settlement's category of other potential defendants. That's even though Andrew is not named in the document. And they will argue that Giuffre's case should be dismissed since she signed away her rights to mount legal cases against those connected with Epstein. Interestingly, in that same 2019 interview, Andrew denied being particularly close to Epstein. So he said the following: "It would be to some extent a stretch to say that, as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people, and I had a lot of opportunity to go to the United States, but I didn't have much time with him. I suppose I saw him once or twice a year, perhaps maybe maximum of 3 times a year. And quite often, if I was in the United States and doing things, and if he wasn't there, he would say, 'Well, why don't you come and use my houses?' And so I said, 'That's very kind. Thank you very much indeed.'" Obviously, we're no legal experts, but it seems a bit odd to claim a limited connection to Epstein 1 minute and then to argue the following, that a settlement indemnifying those connected to him should apply to you. Also worth noting from that quote I read you there, Andrew's argument was always, I was not close friends with Jeffrey Epstein, I was close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was friends with Epstein. We hear less of that now, don't we? Ash, regardless of the legal case here, what does this mean for Andrew's already trashed reputation?
People look at Prince Andrew and they see a man who, because of his combination of wealth and privilege, the fact that he's been told his entire life that he is superior to everybody else that he shares a country with just by virtue of his bloodline, that all of these things have turned him into an absolute idiot. Because nobody with even a molecule of critical faculties would have waltzed into that Newsnight interview confident, even if it was the absolute gospel truth, that Pizza Express and an inability to sweat would make a persuasive case in the court of public opinion when the subject matter is exploitation of a trafficked minor. All right? Even if you were completely innocent, if you were a smart person, not even a smart person, if you were just a basic, normal, regular person, you would go, that's not something that I'm going to do. So it's not surprising to me that these claims, which were absolutely farcical at the time that they were broadcast, are now being unpicked one by one. From the idea that you could take your child to a birthday party in a Pizza Express in Woking and there be no witnesses who can testify to that fact. So not the person whose birthday party it was supposed to be a children's birthday party, so not their parents, no one else who attended, none of the staff there, nobody who saw you by chance. I mean, I know that Prince Andrew isn't one of the most famous royals, but pretty much everyone can remember, at least one person would remember that they saw an actual living, breathing member of the royal family on that date at that time. His diary would contain that perhaps as part of his list of engagements. There would be a record somewhere, either lodged in somebody's memory or on some scrap of paper, in my opinion. I find it incredibly hard to comprehend that the son of the Queen could go to a Pizza Express and there'd be no witnesses to testify to that fact. As for the matter of sweating, Michael, I agree with you. Again, talking about it as a medical condition and then talking about having taken certain steps in the recent past to then recover your lost ability to sweat, I would imagine that that would involve somewhere along the line a medical professional who would make notes of it as part of your medical records, unless Prince Andrew is somebody who regularly self-diagnoses and self-prescribes treatment for quite complex phenomena like an overdose of adrenaline-induced loss of the capacity to perspire. So, yeah, it's completely insulting to our intelligence. Even within that Newsnight interview, there were several contradictions. One being, well, I wasn't close to Jeffrey Epstein, but I did have to go stay around his house for 3 days to break off our friendship. This was after he was convicted for some of his offenses. Of course, he was let off very leniently at that time. So even within that one interview, there was a litany of contradictions which should be straightened out in a court of law. So I do think it's fairly revealing that rather than saying, you know what, I am so confident of my innocence that I will, put myself forward before any due process, and I will establish my innocence beyond any shadow of a doubt. Instead, his lawyers are trying to get him off on what is essentially a technicality. Now, of course, there is an innocent before proven guilty principle in our legal system. That's very important, and I'm glad that it's there. But in the court of public opinion, it doesn't necessarily, in people's minds, debunk certain notions, certain suspicions.
There had been some speculation that we would find a bit more details about the allegations made against Andrew. It turns out the main thing we've sort of discovered is how much money was involved. And I was kind of shocked. $500,000. This guy was a billionaire, like one of the richest people in America. And $500,000 got him agreement that not only meant that this woman could never take him to court again, but anyone ever associated with this guy could never take her to court again. It seems like, I think the idea that you can make an agreement where you won't take anyone associated with the person to court is pretty strange. I mean, it only applies to civil cases, right? So I assume this wouldn't carry over to a prosecution in criminal court, but it still struck me as pretty odd.
Well, it is pretty odd. But again, we know that Jeffrey Epstein had some pretty good lawyers, because when you look at his lenient treatment for those first set of charges, he was able to be treated like no other child sex trafficker in the history of the world would be treated. So we know that he's got a pretty decent set of lawyers. We know that he was very adept at manipulating law enforcement, the criminal justice system, the legal system as a whole in his interest, simply because he had an awful lot of wealth. And I think one of the things to bear in mind is that, $500,000 is not a lot of money compared to what Jeffrey Epstein himself had, or indeed potentially had access to. We don't know where a lot of those hidden assets of Ghislaine Maxwell's father ended up. If you're Virginia Roberts and you're somebody who has been immensely traumatized by their childhood experiences, if you're somebody who doesn't have access to a lot of money, or certainly nowhere near the amount of money that Jeffrey Epstein is in command of, you even embarking on this civil suit is a huge financial risk, absolutely huge. And I think that's one of the things that's hard to imagine, which is if she'd lost, she might have been liable to cover all of Jeffrey Epstein's legal costs in addition to her own. She might have been seeing the cost of her own legal counsel stacking up. And that is incredibly intimidating, because there's one way of looking at things, which is, somebody's got nothing to lose. But actually, it is very possible to have less than nothing. It is possible to be completely crushed under the weight of debts and financial obligations. And I can understand being completely sincere and honest about your account that happened to you, but also still taking a settlement, which to our eyes looks like not very much money, but to her eyes at the time seeming like a lot of money, and feeling intimidated by the risks involved by continuing the suit. I can understand that.